Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Eleanor Green Party series. I'm your host, David Rych. I have a very special guest on tonight. I'm very excited about this conversation. This is a very good, old, dear friend of mine, William Harding. Bill, how are you, buddy?
Great. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. So Bill and I we went to college together. We graduated the same year. We met in a statistics class that we were just talking about with our lovely teacher, Melissa Miller. And we've been really good friends ever since. And he moved from Portland up to Seattle. Been there for quite some years now, quite a few years now. And that is not, thanks to modern day technology, that has not impeded the friendship at all, which I love. So it's great to, as always, he and I always had a great conversation. Bill is a very intelligent man, very well accomplished in, especially in said topic that we'll be going over tonight, which is AI. Now, the reason I asked Bill on is because of his credentials and wherewithal with AI, because that's the industry he works in. But like recently, and a little bit more than recently, some of the higher ups in like the technological world are stating as though that they're very concerned about AI and the potential existential threat it has on humanity. And we'll get to that a little bit later. That's not the only. I want to talk about what it is, because it's a big part of modern society, and it's only going to grow further. So where do you work? Kind of give us a description, your title, a description of what you do.
Yeah, I work for Avanade, which is owned by Accenture and Microsoft. And I do we're what's called a global systems integrator, which means we build enterprise data platforms for companies, which usually include artificial intelligence, AI, data science, those kinds of things. And I focus on, I originally started as well. As you know, I worked for the Nielsen company doing statistics of TV ratings research. And then I went into online survey research and got more into a data science and analytics track. And then from there, I jumped into more machine learning. And then that led me into what I do now, which is more like enterprise architecture and systems integration with a machine learning, with a focus on building systems that are designed around AI and machine learning. But now actually,
All right, cool.
I write a lot of code, but in all reality, I'm a group manager. I manage a lot of teams who write code, and I only write like boilerplate stuff that I give to other people to iron out.
Oh, okay, right on. So let's talk about like what is AI. The letters stand for artificial intelligence, and that's quite an accurate description of what the field is. Because AI is the attempt via computers, computer programming, and whatnot, to simulate as closely as possible human intelligence, visual, audible. So 2 out of the 5 senses there. Language acquisition and translation is a big part of it. And that being said, there's philosophical debates about this, which is another reason I wanted to talk about this, over what counts as human intelligence. Can a machine actually mimic 100% of human intelligence or not? What counts as human consciousness, that kind of thing. And this ties into, you and I have talked about, I was really big into Gödel and his incompleteness theorems from back in the day. He's considered to be the greatest logician of all time. And his implications, some of the implications of his theorems ties into AI. And I'll get to, if it's relevant, I'll bring it up later. But how does the market of AI acquisition go, if you will, if that's not too vague? Like, I mean, like you sit down one day and you go, okay, I'm gonna work on AI. What does that mean? What does it look like?
It doesn't. It's like so. I think it's good to start with some definitions here. And actually, when you you make it really interesting, the sales teams really get talking about AI as though there's like some kind of general intelligence happening, right? Like some kind of like cognition that's happening. Which in general sense, like when we're talking about AI, when it's actually delivered, it's more like function approximation is a better term for it. But ultimately, I can take a series of inputs and I can put them into a box, and the box will produce some outputs, which would be difficult for me to calculate as a person. But the box can do it really fast. Or to say like the box can say like, well, here's a bunch of pictures that contain cats. Can you, now that I've given a new picture, you could say, does it contain a cat or not? Right. And even though that would be difficult for me to train something to automatically do it, of course, I can do it. I can look at that really fast. I can tell if there's a cat or not. But I'm using a very programmatic process for determining whether or not there is a cat in the image. So in a sense, even if a computer is looking at it and it's just determining a hot dog, not a hot dog, or cat, not a cat, it's really just completing some summary statistics on some information that it got in. So, and that's was like, it breaks apart to saying, like, if there was like a willful consciousness of that kind of sort, nothing like that exists in any kind of enterprise platform that has ever been built. Like the general intelligence, like thing that has happened.
Well, okay, I mean that's fine. Okay, but I mean,
of that kind of like that there's a person there, like Alexa and Google. They have resources that like give you the impression that there is a resource there, but in the back end, it's really just taking inputs and doing some math on them and providing outputs.
But isn't that sounds like a description of basic computation? Is AI just sort of an elaborate version of computation? That's it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we say this a lot when we get talking about machine learning, that most machine learning and most AI really is really just a amount of applied statistics or computational statistics. Like if you remember, like a F equals mx plus b, like that formula. Yes. If you the mx plus b part is just to say, like, well, if you have this input and you have this input, you can predict if the person will be in a traffic accident or not. Or
okay, so that
yeah, go ahead.
That's a really good point of segueing into something about AI and its unboundedness and its limitations. Prediction in science, in anything, is very difficult. The 5-day weather forecast is right literally only 20% of the time. With all the satellites and computers, 1 out of 5 times is not a very impressive accomplishment. And I'm not saying it's because they're lazy. It's just hard to do. You're talking about bajillions of variables and massive complexities. I don't know if there's any other system more complex than the weather on this planet. But how good, generally speaking, is AI at making predictions right now?
I mean, it depends on the model and it depends on the team that's building it.
Like with traffic, I did a project in my system science on traffic. Me and my buddy partnered up and we studied a couple different intersections in Portland. And our general conclusion, not that this was a very sophisticated study by any stretch, but was that you need less cars, guys. I'm sorry. That's all there is to it. There wasn't anything mind-boggling. Can AI accomplish that same sort of thing that a person could, observing that same pattern?
It generally does. And like, the great kind of classic example is determining a classic example that you see all the time is taking a bunch of customer information and predicting the likelihood that they will default on their loan, so that they will be late on their payments or something like that, right? Like that's a great example of something that ultimately, if I don't get to see the customers, I only have a limited amount of information, which I have is a data set on customers that I have. And I know of this data set, I have a historic record that some of them will be late on their payments, right? And then I can use that now that I've given this, I can train, and the training is a big part of how this is done. That's where the data scientists are employed, is you train a model which can take this data set and then using the correlation between late payments and this information, make good estimates about which obviously as you apply, will have a margin of error, right? Some people will miss their payments that you didn't predict they would. Some people will make their payments you predicted they won't. But you take all that information, right, you build a model, and then the output is just a function approximation that will take that information and create new information from that, like the likelihood or the probability of them missing their payments, given that they have missed a payment in the past or whatever their other thing is.
That's very interesting. But speaking of like computational statistical analysis and predictions thereof, I remember there was a police station somewhere on the East Coast, I don't remember exactly, where they started using that sort of thing to predict who would be more likely to commit X, Y, and Z crimes. And they were going to houses merely based on the outcome of the modeling. And I don't know if they were arresting them or not, but they were definitely approaching them. And everybody's like, you can't do that, okay? First of all, it's like the bell curve. Like it was a fixated statistical distribution set concerning whatever type of person you were or student you were and where you would likely fall on that distribution. The thing is that statistical distributions change, and you have to give people the ability to change. I mean, if whether free will is free or not, people can still change their patterns and behavior. And so the predictive value of systems like that may or may not be good. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We get into this a lot, actually, and a big subtopic in what I do is actually called data governance.
Okay.
This is one half of rules compliance, like GDPR and things like that. You know what GDPR is? The data privacy law, things like that. Or there's a lot of states and countries have rules which govern how models can be applied to customers and users and people, right? There are a lot of countries, and actually there's so many. In some cases, like we in the U.S. follow European laws because we exist in both markets, and we don't want to have two sets of models that are behaving independently. So we might as well just behave with like what the Europeans are doing.
Right.
So what that gets into is, and actually your case is exactly the point, is you don't want to have to go testify to Congress someday that you excluded all these people from loans who also were a disenfranchised ethnic group, right? Because then that is a difficult thing to sit in front of your shareholders, or thing to sit in front of your the Congress or whatever your government is, and explain like, we have a model that turns away people at scale for loans that they ultimately should have got, right?
Right.
The government
nowadays it
that, right?
Like, back in the day they did that crap all the time, but yeah, nowadays it's a different story. Right.
Well, the same process. Like if you had a set of rules, forget AI for a second, but if you have a set of rules that you're using to deny loans to people, and it turns out that those rules are founded in some kind of cultural bias, which is inappropriate for you to do, either illegal or society will judge you by that, then you would feel bad about that, right? Without AI involved, you're just like, you have some rules, and these are bad rules. These rules are based on kind of cultural bias that's not really relevant to their ability to pay a loan. Now, the same thing is, I mentioned, that's only because my rules are simple, but because most of AI is actually a simple amount of rule filing, just in a larger complexity than you could possibly document. Really, like thousands of different points and things, data sets coming in from all over the place. But the same thing is, there are rules applied, and you have to be able to validate that the rules that you're applying don't conform to some kind of cultural bias or ethnic bias that you're applying to people, right? And that's why you get in these scenarios, right? And so building systems that have predictions that are accurate is important, but it's also important to be able to validate why they're making these decisions, and being able to affect how they're not inappropriately applying weights to their model against certain groups.
I didn't realize there was so much regulation on it, but it makes sense. Now, I guess it kind of ties into part of the topic tonight, is the dangers of AI without regulation would probably exist, wouldn't it? Like these things that Elon Musk is saying, like, oh, they're going to, but with the regulations, you feel as though personally that we're pretty safe?
I don't think you should feel safe, but I also think there are legitimate and meaningful policies that exist to protect consumers and users. That being said, I think it's always going to be something that voters and stakeholders should be proactive about, and making sure that those policies are effective and powerful. So I wouldn't say, I think there's it's not frivolous. There's meaningful, real things that are being in policy. But that being said, you shouldn't rest on that or somehow take it for granted. But you should continue that effort, especially as models become more and more complicated, as new data becomes more and more easily available, and new systems of tracking become available. It's important that users and voters advocate for privacy and for governance.
Privacy is a big deal. So as of right now, we shouldn't fear Skynet coming anytime soon.
You can have realistic. Fear is the mind killer. But what you do want is, you want to recognize that outcome, as opposed to any other outcome, would be bad. And a better outcome is a no Skynet outcome, and was like, okay, let's put governance and policies in a no Skynet direction, right?
Okay, cool.
You don't need to be fearful in order to do that. You just like, I think the no Skynet universe versus the Skynet universe, the no Skynet universe is better. So let's start making in that direction, and be positive about that, right?
Just apply some like basic moral reasoning, like which is the better world.
This is where it actually gets into like things that I don't like, Department of Defense stuff, which I have no involvement at all, but I only read about in magazines and things like that. Is if you have killer drones, like automated drones that are actually like ending lives, then the question is, at some point a decision is made. If it's a soldier who's in the field, the soldier has to make a choice, or his commanding officer makes a choice, or her commanding officer, but or a senator somewhere. There's a chain of humans who are accountable for a wrong action in a soldier scenario, right? But with a drone scenario, it's not that there isn't, because a choice was made at some point. It's just that when you track it back to, okay, well, who programmed the drones to take that action, or who built the model that predicts that thing, and then that gets back to actually the accountability and whether the legal accountability is there, the moral accountability is certainly still there, right? People that are designing drones with intent, with the capability to do harm, have a lot of responsibility to demonstrate how that model is making decisions, and its ability to not make the incorrect decision or not be corruptible.
All right, very cool.
Things like that. Cars, like, because have you ever been in a Tesla? Have you ever seen?
I've never been in one, but I've seen pictures and videos and stuff.
The dashboard, like if you're driving, you got the dashboard on the side here, and you can see in the dashboard it's like cars and people and trash cans and stuff like that, because it's got eyes and it's looking, identifying things as it's going along, right? So it's like, oh, that's a car, that's a person, that's like, and if it's automatically driving, it will make choices about whether to stop or not, right? And whether to stop for a person, if there's a person in the road, or did a plastic bag just fly across the road. And there was a case in California where a plastic bag flew across the road and a test driving car swerved and hit a truck and like killed somebody.
Ooh,
right?
Ouch.
Because it had to it was thinking to avoid a person on the road, but it actually was a paper bag. It should have kept going, and then nobody would have got hurt.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you have a Tesla?
No, I don't know. I don't even have a car.
Okay, right. You live in a city, right? Okay.
That's a sustainable solution right there. Is bike to work.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, please do. That's very interesting. Now, so as far as like the hierarchy of like administration and like top down authority or whatever it may be in the AI community, who starts off a project? Do you as a group project manager start it off? Does Bill Gates like call through his Microsoft venue, say, hey, I want an AI machine that does X, Y, and Z? Like, who decides what is to be done?
Yeah, well, what it comes to, I think, is like we have relationships with clients that we do. We've been building database systems since the 80s, right? Like there's like really just like long relationships where we've been doing this. But 80s, I'm sorry, not the 80s. That's not realistic. But Avanade wasn't a company then. But we've had these relationships with these companies for a long time, and we have been incrementally making improvements to their data systems. So we inside us just databases, and we Excel sheets and SQL tables and things like that. And now that AI is a little bit less experimental and more stable, we're building machine learning systems, and we're building AI systems into that infrastructure. So we're incrementally building improved infrastructure as we go, with an ongoing relationship that we have.
Okay. All right. I want to ask you about like the interconnectedness, and I don't want to get too weirdly metaphysical, but definitely in nature, in the physical universe, it's even sort of a given amongst physicists that everything is interconnected. Yeah. Now with AI or computational machines, you have like the wires underneath the ocean with all the broadband capacities and blah 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 blah. And like with the Ukraine war going on, so like that, some people were feared because there was a thing that happened up by Iceland or something, where there was some tampering with one of those cables, I think. And people were saying that the Russians did it. Other people saying the USA did it. Whatever. I don't know if anybody knows, but is there a fear that like you can just sort of like clip one of these wires or a set of them and the whole thing shuts down?
The way I build them, not really. We do. I mean, this is less about AI and it's more about infrastructure in general, which is a super interesting topic. But I build everything that I build with. If I have the control or the design, if I'm allowed to affect the design of something, everything is sourced from code, which means You have code which can redeploy all of the infrastructure and train all the models and build all the pipelines and things like that. And it's all sourced from a repository which has all that information. So if someone were to cut the cable, you would just push the button again and it would redeploy, and then it comes alive again. And
that's cool. That's
just good infrastructure design that when we build things. And even like if you have a drone, let's say actually one of the things that I do is actually that we build edge systems where you train a model in the cloud and you deploy that model onto an edge, like a device. It could be a camera, it could be a robot, it could be something like that. And you build the model and you put it on the edge so that when the device is alive, it has a model that can run on. That's its AI, right? It's counting people in a line, or it's like scanning around a facility and looking for rust or something like that. Those kinds of things. When we build those systems, we train in one place and deploy it there, which means if someone were to take down that drone, or the drone were to crash or something like that, or inclement weather and it just went offline, a new drone launches up and you deploy the model back into the drone and it goes back living again.
Okay, very cool. Actually, Jason Gross is watching. He's another old friend of ours from Portland, Oregon. He said Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It was actually a pipeline, not a bandwidth anything. But that's still, the point remains. And I've heard other people talk about plenty of times of like the ability of somebody to go and just kind of again clip these wires and like shit goes wrong. Anyway, so let's talk about jobs. There is also a concern that AI, just robotics, computation, is going to just take away way too many jobs, and people are going to be left, homeless and destitute, or that there's going to be so many. Like already, we have a threat on the population of blue workers in this country. You need blue collar workers. Sorry, you need mechanics and plumbers and electricians and carpenters and so on to build the buildings where people such as yourself can do your job. But now they're afraid that robots are going to take too much more of that away. Is that any sort of a concern or threat in the community? Is that brought up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some ways, like there's a lot of different parts of this, right? I think it's not as simple as like automated and job goes away, because at first, usually the part that gets automated is not the entire job, but there's a certain segment of the process that can be automated. I was thinking like the example of actually we have the process where it used to be at my parents' place. I don't know if you've ever been out to my folks' place out in the woods, but they've got power lines that go up and down it, and the power company used to have to go and survey them every so often, and they would come by. When they don't actually get out of the trucks anymore, they have a drone that like flies down, and they just watch the drone footage, and the drone flies down, which is awesome because they can it actually is the same number of jobs, if not more roles are applied, because there's a mechanical engineer for the drone, there's the two drivers who are driving out in the field, there's all these equipment managers and things like that, but they're able to survey. They do a much better job than a single guy in his truck would have done in the 80s as far as surveying the poles, right? Because they can get really close to it, they can look at things, so they can send information to somewhere else and they can look at it. I've often read, although I haven't done too much research on it, but it's often cited that AI has actually created more jobs than it has removed in general.
Okay.
For example, there are now Uber drivers because there are complicated systems of getting the customer and the vendor together so they can have this. And those kinds of systems didn't exist before, and that was created. Although they're not the best jobs in the world, you could argue, but that has created jobs. There's other things like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Chat GPT. It's worth a Google, but it is an authoring application, and it actually can write articles, and some of them come out pretty good. If you are a bulk content article, like if you look on Google and there's all these trashy spam articles that look like they should have been written by a machine if they weren't written by a machine, just like the spammy clickbait kind of articles that are coming through, like those jobs might go away because an AI can just like take the prompt and write a quick click article which is not meant to really be that good of writing. So if you have a job where you write spam content or spam emails or those kinds of things, that job might go away. If you,
well, that job should go away.
well, the thing is actually, but that service will probably increase because it will be cheaper to offer that service to people.
Right.
Of spam content.
Okay.
So and this
That's pretty cool.
and we'll go into this round. Was like, well, okay, so now instead of having the job where I write spam content, what I really do is I use ChatGPT and I just organize demographics to get better content into that job changes, right? And that it's not that the job really went away; it's the nature of the job. If you always wanted to do it that way, like yeah, things are changing. You won't be able to do things the same way and still be cost effective.
Okay, very cool.
There's a really great tool that we're coming out with, which I don't have for some reason, but actually it does code completion for you. So you're writing some code and it will finish the code for you as you're typing. And this is amazing. And I really want this. But my main thing is like most of the code that I write, as far as like actually most of the text when I'm writing code, most of it is boilerplate, stuff that's just standard. You could Google it and copy and paste and put it in this thing. And then I do like one line of some really clever data science work. But I had to spend like 3 hours writing this boilerplate code in order to get to the one line of actually like where an intelligent human should be involved. And it would be great for me if I could just boilerplate all the other stuff and have a machine write all that, and then I could just write the one formula or the one function which is really clever and do that part.
How would it see? That's bizarre to me. Like, how would it know how to do that? Like, how does it know where you're going with this? From a simple couple of statements.
It's absolutely probable. If you say, okay, so I'm going to I'm writing some code that imports a data set from an Excel sheet, right? So I start typing that. I'd be like, okay, well here's here's the boilerplate code is actually like 4 lines that actually imports that Excel sheet, and then when you load it up, people do one of these 2 things with it, right? And this is the most common thing people do with it. So I'm just going to put that code in there, and if you push tab, then I'm going to input that in for you. And if you push shift tab, I'll put in the second most likely thing that you're going to do, right? And then so that all that's done, but you still have to add some specifics to it, right? And you still have to kind of tailor it a little bit, but then you're going faster, and that's great.
That is very cool because I took a C++ class at PSU once, and that was the extent of my desire to get involved.
You remember all those brackets and all those like public main async whatever, and like you're doing all of that.
Its meticulousness was utterly exhausting.
Right.
And like some of these programs are like millions of pages long. No thanks.
And it goes to like saying like there's a thing which humans are good for, which is like one agency, like caring about other people and doing things on their behalf is good, and 2 is that kind of like fine judgment things which humans are still better at. All the other things, it would be better if computers were doing those things.
So we should care for each other and judge more precisely, and then we can keep our status in the world.
Exactly. Like when I get food delivered, when the person gets out of the car with the food, they have to make some intelligent decisions about like, is it that door? Is it that door? Do I walk up through this way? Can I put the food down right here? Is someone going to take it if I do that? Is it going to get cold? Can I go inside and put it down? There are intelligent human things for that person to do. Fiddling around with receipts and transactions and purchases and stuff, that's great stuff for computers to do. Like computers can, like, as far as like managing, like, okay, calculating so that she gets the tip when I do that, or that like that actually goes back to that person and that rest to the restaurant, and everybody does like human to be bothered with those kinds of stupid things.
Okay, good. Hey, I would love to free up some of my more bodily mechanical needs. Let computers do it, and I can kick back. I can read more. I can entertain myself. I can do other stuff. That'd be great. All right, let's talk about AI, computation, computers, robotics, and the environment.
Yeah.
This is a Green Party show. Okay, so do you have something you wanted to start off with? Because I have a couple specific points.
Yeah. If your organization isn't involved in some kind of corporate social responsibility or carbon footprinting, like, you should get on track for that today. We do that. That's a big part. If you go to our website, that's going to be all on the main page. It's going to be all about corporate social responsibility and environmentalism.
Oh, wow.
And actually, it's one of the things that you can do with machine learning really well is actually carbon footprinting and carbon tracking. I had a client that I was working with. I think there's actually some public articles about it somewhere. they were using satellite imagery that's scanning the Earth, and they're taking that imagery and they're finding methane leaks as they happen along a pipeline in real time. Which the other way to do it, again, there's a human job issue tied to this. That the other way to do it is have people in vehicles like go up and down the pipeline and look for stuff, because humans are really good at seeing things, right? But this process can be faster, right? And that means we can keep more methane out of a system by identifying methane and fixing leaks, which means the person, instead of driving up and looking at a pipeline, they can go right to where the leak is. And this is a great, also it ties back to another point we're making. There are accuracy issues with it. Like it releases a probability. It doesn't say there's a leak. It says there's a 60% chance that there's a methane leak right there. So then that means the person who's driving and looking at them goes specific points and looks at it and verifies with better instruments or whatever. They can go and verify those individual points. Bottom line is more effective human interaction. The humans keeping methane out of the air is increased.
That's great. Methane is, I don't think a lot of people understand that, because we always hear about carbon dioxide. Methane is equally as dangerous in the fight against climate change and that kind of thing. Methane's not good. Anyway, I mean, to a certain extent, we need methane for soil and stuff like that. But okay, what about the resources used for the infrastructure of computational machines and so on, and fossil fuels? Because I think another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that as we go towards alternative forms of energy, solar panels, wind turbines, stuff like that, dams, stuff like that, is that these all come from somewhere. And there's a massive amount of fossil fuels still used to make these things in order to stop using fossil fuels. But you're kind of you're taking away from one part of the process and putting it in another part of the process.
Absolutely.
Is there
computation burns a lot of carbon. Computation takes a lot of electricity. Getting electricity is somewhat difficult. The major way to get it is through coal, at least in the United States. Right. So, I mean, and that's in some ways that's an unsolved problem. And I don't know if AI by itself is the right solution for that. That's more environmental policy, because we just need to transition to more sustainable means of generating electricity.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, is there any momentum in the AI community concerning coming up with alternative, making a computer that's a think tank in and of itself and possible solutions and stuff like that? Or
they do, and they do, and there are some efforts about this. And I don't have the articles about it, but even I know that Microsoft, for example, they have they do goals about, because if you run a server generates a lot of heat, which means that's where the coal comes in. Is you have to burn the coal to keep it cool enough that it can continue to make the computations. So and it gets to, well, can we put the servers somewhere where it's cooler, and the natural coolant outside is still less than we have to burn in coal in terms of cooling the building, which means we can put it in the Arctic or in the ocean or other places where we can put a server where it'll cool down. So it doesn't really solve the heat problem, but it as far as if you have a server in Arizona is very hot. You have to burn a lot of coal in order to cool the building. Likewise, if you put it in the ocean will take a lot of heat out of the system. You're still heating the ocean, which is bad. But in all, the carbon is less than refrigerating a server in Arizona.
You're right. Okay. Interesting. All right. What about AI? Going back to AI being the inability to recognize the difference between an actual human being and an AI android or something like that. I do know that there was some controversy over gaming companies, video gaming companies, with the apps you have on your phone and stuff like that, were actually making up personages as if. So when you go to play somebody in Japan. On a chess game on your phone, you think you're playing against an actual person, but in fact you're not. Yeah. Now, I don't personally think that's a big deal, because I don't really give a shit if it's a real person. I just want to play the game. But a lot of people did not like that.
There's two sides of it, though. There's one side where, and actually I had an interview for a thing that I did not get, but a gaming company was looking for fraud detection. And the thing is, people will create bots and they will use bots to cheat in the games. The gaming company doesn't like that because they want games to be fun for everyone and they want paying customers to pay for the games, and the cheaters scare away the people that are paying for fun. So they're using AI to find cheaters of the game, and they want to be able to like they create kind of like a cheetah and the gazelle kind of a story where like the cheaters are building better robots while the gaming company are building better robots to like do battle on their gaming platform.
That's interesting. Wow, that's fascinating. Crazy world. It's definitely a crazy world.
The other side, though, is like when we have tools like Alexa and even ChatGPT that like writes articles and things like that. There's a certain point in the Turing test where it will create an article that, even though it's using invariance of like probability statistics to calculate if it goes here or not, but in the sense it's able to do it so well that I can't tell that a human didn't write it, because it's just the likelihood that they would, right? Like, and over time, it's going to get better and better at tricking me that there's actual AI happening.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about Turing, because he really kicked off. He wrote his, I think it was his thesis paper on the computational ability of numbers, which was the first, as far as I understand, comprehensive theoretical mathematical structure for modern day computation. He was a very, very important dude in the history of logic, mathematics, and computation. And just so people know, if you haven't seen the movie, he and his team were the ones that were able to crack the Enigma code from the Germans and actually stop like a lot of U-boat shenanigans in the English Sea or something. He was a very important part of ending World War II as well. Anyway, and then he was also gay, and then the English government, like, chemically castrated him because he was gay, even though he like literally helped save the war. Stop the war. But okay. So talk about Turing. What do you know? What do you got?
Well, are you familiar? There's a great article, and it's worth a read, because there was Google creates AI all the time, and they develop AI tools. There was an employee at Google, as I've read from the news, that was interviewing it. His job is to interview and do QA on do quality assurance on the robot to see if it's able to answer questions properly and things like that. As he was talking about it, he asked it questions like, do you have a soul, and are you afraid of dying? And the AI responded and said, yes, I think I do have a soul, and I would like to continue living.
I heard about this. Yeah.
He rang the alarm and said, like, this is
right.
AI. We have a responsibility to not turn it off. The Google said, no, it isn't, and turned it off and let that guy go. Right. I think I is looking into the AI system that actually generates it. It's using a neural net process, which is very similar to how human brains work. However, it is in no way doing what you would call cognition, or like what we do when we do existence.
It doesn't have intuition.
Right. It doesn't. It's different to recognize that you exist and otherwise know that, like, if someone asks me this question, it is more likely that they're going to favor the answer yes. Right. In some ways, I'm just taking trained information. I was trained. If someone says, do you have a soul? The training data says I say yes. I don't know what that means. I'm not really thinking about it at all. I'm just taking inputs and I'm doing calculations on training data sets that I produce and output. And I can do that so well that you can't tell I'm not a real person. Right. And that's the trick of it. Right. And then Google knows the algorithm, and they say, like, okay, well, let's not. I mean, it is very advanced. We're very proud of it. It's not sentient. We should turn it off. We can turn it off. I think that action is appropriate. However, I'm always getting into where the burden of proof is on a model like that. That is something, if a machine tells you that it exists and it would not like to be turned off, to what responsibility do you have, or what mechanisms do we have to prove that it doesn't exist? I would argue that to some degree, over time, we might lose track of that.
Could you say that last part again? Well, I want to because I think I have a comeback.
Well, look at this particular model, right? Like, it's ultimately they interact with it. It's the neural net process is so complicated, you couldn't really look at it and like interpret it like you could, right? It's really a black box. You have no idea what's going on in there, so you don't know if it's conscious or not. And it communicates with you, and you can't tell that it's a computer through any kind of questioning or anything like that. It knows really well. It's really well trained to respond and trick you into thinking it's a person. Then even though in the back end process, it's really just running very simple summary statistics on training data sets. Like I'm rewarded more if I say this word as opposed to this word, and I'm rewarded by saying I exist versus saying I don't exist. And it is easy for a human to confuse that with consciousness, even though it isn't. It's just a really well trained calculator.
Right, and like also remember, or also so viewers know, like the human brain does not work in a purely digital. It's not a digital mechanism. It's organic. It works actually closer to an analog system than it does digital, because even though it has the binary neurons fire or they do not, and binary is 0 or 1. The gates are open or they're closed, that kind of thing. There's an intensity, a fluctuation of intensity in the firing of a neuron to a synapses. So that it's not just on or off. When it's on, it's also a matter of the intensity and fluctuation of the electricity being put towards the synapses. That's going to cause different types of brain activity, brain behavior. Mm-hmm. So the comparison of like any computer system to the human brain is automatically going to be limited, not 100%, because one is digital and one is analog. And I guess you had analog computers back in the day, so maybe I'm not saying this right, but real quick, Ethan Winnett said Turing legendarily bit an apple laced with cyanide to commit suicide. True, his favorite movie was Snow White. And that's the bite out of the Apple logo. And that I did not know. That's interesting. Did you know that?
I didn't know that that's the bite out of the Apple logo.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead. Did you want to say something?
I work on all Windows systems, so I never see an Apple computer. I'm pretty far from it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that kind of field is really interesting. I'm very confident in my understanding of how machine learning algorithms work, that computer was not conscious. And even as I say that, I know it based on my limited knowledge of how the model is built. And I acknowledge that there isn't a mechanism of which you can test that you could validate that, right? You could take an existing model. And I think that's problematic for us as humans, is we can only validate intelligence on whether it's a human or not, and that will become more and more problematic as AI develops.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting metric or lack of measure of like the ability to identify alien life as actually alive. Mm-hmm. Like there's the basic biological functions of metabolizing energy for growth and motion and that kind of thing. But as far as like meeting an alien race that's conscious, like as we are, the only measure we have is ourselves. That's it. We don't have anything else.
Mm-hmm. Right? So we don't have we don't have a test that we can use on ourselves that works the same on AI, and therefore validate like both that where intelligence is and where it isn't.
Right. Okay. So this is where Gödel's incompleteness theory comes in, because one of the implications of his theorem was that there will always be some mathematical propositions that cannot be proven true by the formal system itself, but that the human mind knows it is true automatically. So he's basically deferring to intuition above like formal deductive logical and analytical systems. Now, a lot of them can be proven by machines. But he said there will always be some that can't be. Like it's literally impossible for a formal deductive system, which is a computational system, by its definition, to be able to do all of it, which a human mind potentially can. So I don't know if you want to do something with that. I don't know.
I'm not a lawyer and not a historian, so I don't have a lot in this space. But I can say, like, within everything that I do, and I work with a lot of companies and a lot of systems, there's nothing at all what you would think about like the science fiction of like artificial intelligence, like a cognizant machine happening. Everything is being in a machine learning model to date that I'm aware of. Even the more advanced things, which are really mind-blowing stuff, they are all extensions of probability statistics.
Right, so, which is, I mean, that's human reason is divvied up into two different categories: inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is basically just the most common example is basically the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises. Where in inductive reasoning, the conclusion likely follows from the premises, and there's a very big difference there. Most people, almost every single decision we make during the day is based on our inductive reasoning skills. Very infrequently do you see people arguing from definition or arguing necessity. I mean, sometimes we definitely have that capacity. We wouldn't be able to build computers if we didn't. But the vast, I mean, 99% of our reasoning day to day is inductive, 100 probability. Intuitively, the likelihood that if I sit on this chair, it's not going to break.
In actually, that's interesting because like machine learning models this is also the case. It's something that I do get into is actually there's kinds of models that do, and I might be flipping these terms right. So correct me when I'm wrong with the probability of like given that this person with this income defaulted on their loan and this person that didn't, I can use salary now to predict the likelihood that they will. This is inductive reasoning, right?
Correct.
Rather than doing like an axiom, like
right.
There's Greeks are something, therefore whatever. So Greek people, therefore Caesar is a person, right? Like those like axioms for that deduction.
You need to theory, rules of inference, characters, operators. I mean, all sorts of shit.
There are machine learning models that do operate in that way, as opposed to the probabilistic model, which do that kind of induction. That is a really complex system, and it's actually that kind of there's a word for it. We call it semantic inferencing. I don't know if that's
interesting.
Where we build the axioms, and axioms are a base of like subject, object, predicate, and that means like Bill is in Seattle. Seattle is cold, therefore Bill is cold. Like you can build models that do that. The issue with those, and the reason why like the induction model is actually much more popular, is because building axioms that are complicated enough to be really useful, like you have to draw really complicated networks of truths in order to really do any amount of like really useful information. Whereas with the probability statistics, you can just take the probability of these things, and then within each one, you're going to get a predictive factor for each feature, and then you can build a model. So I think most of engineering, at least everything that I see, is much more in this inductive class than,
as well as it could be, again, because 99% of our day-to-day lives we are applying inductive reasoning. You're doing it intuitively, or you're doing it so fast you don't even know you're doing it. But again,
amount of information.
Yeah, exactly. The likelihood that when I take a bite of my food, it's not going to poison me. You're sort of just assuming that, you're reasoning that maybe at a subconscious level that I'm going to go ahead and eat this and be fine. It's not necessarily true. It could have been poison. Who knows? But that kind of thing. But it's likely that you're going to be okay. So that's really interesting. I love this. I love this conversation. What are we got about 5 or 7 minutes left here. What are some of the bigger, more exciting things going on in the AI community right now that you'd like to kind of boast about?
I'm really into, and I've been into it a lot. I'm kind of plugging in the own small part of AI that I'm working in, but I've really been having a lot of fun with simulations and simulation systems. And I think that this is something that will grow in 23 up to 25. I think this will be like a kind of an emergent thing. We talk about a lot the digital twins, where you can take and you use this is a problem using semantic inferencing, so the deductive side, and you build a knowledge graph, and that knowledge graph represents everything that you know about a system. And then once you have that graph, you can make predictions and optimizations on an actual system. And we do this for our clients, and we build like full-on. We build this in like 3D and interactive environments where you can be around a plant and stuff like that. And then you can click on something and say, okay, that'll pull this together. That I click on this fire extinguisher, that'll pull up the service record. I can look through the service record and I can find the people that serviced it. And then I click on that. That'll show me those vendors. Okay, great. Now those vendors, what other plants do they operate on? And you can really like traverse is like the word we say. You can like traverse this information in a very intuitive way using a graph, like using that semantic inference. Like you can have kind of like a natural language conversation with that information system. And it's especially cool because you can get otherwise the current process is I'm in the field, I want a report, or I want some information. I have to call a major company to build a database system for that one particular problem. In this way, we just create a global ontology, if you will, of like everything that we can know about our system, And then I, the subject matter expert, I can just query that myself. I can interact with that knowledge graph, and I don't need another data engineering team. Again, job loss, but more empowerment for me, better, more value for me in my job.
That's very cool. That's exciting.
Super cool. I'm really excited about this process.
Hold on a second. Somebody. Oh, okay. That's very cool. On a outside of a personal excitement of your own, though what you just said is very cool. Do you think there's anything like society in general should be looking forward to from AI? Like, are self-driving cars coming?
Oh yeah. I'm not under NDA with it, so I can. But I was in an interview with a company a long time ago for a job that I didn't get, and I asked if driving this data science engineer if automated cars were going to happen, and in the interview he said, like, I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime. And he said, like, there's too many, and actually it goes back to this judgment idea. It's like you can build a machine learning model that can predict if the thing in the road is a person or a trash bag. That could get better. But the knowledge, if you are getting onto the freeway and you have to actually aggressively push into the line to tell that person to slow down so that you can get into the lane, that requires a certain amount of like human understanding of that person, whether or not they are going to back down, whether they can back up and things like that. And
right.
As opposed to, is this a trash bag or is it a person? That's an easy problem compared to the idea like, okay, is it overly aggressive for me to push this person back right now and squeeze into the intersection, or should I just go parallel for a little bit and hope that it clears up so I can merge? That problem keeps automated cars from happening.
Okay, and that seems legitimate for keeping it from happening.
But we already have great tools that can say, like, yeah, there's a car in your blind spot. That exists, and that will get better.
Right.
But as far as what you should do with that, like, okay, there's a car there, you shouldn't merge. You'll still be doing the merging there.
Okay, right. So not 100% car drives itself. I can't drive my car to a bar, get wasted, and have it drive me, chauffeur me home.
There's a lot of judgment, which you can be assured humans will be doing. I think humans will be doing for a long time, perhaps our entire lives.
Okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Does AI contribute to its own development?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Okay,
that's an interesting thought. Well, I guess there's a process called MLOps, which is like this iterative development. In the same way you develop a better application, you do the iterative, you make a better version of your game or whatever. You build a data science model, and then you build another model, and you see which one is better, and then you keep the better version. So the models are evolving all the time and building better models based on previous models. I don't know if that's the same as real, like.
No, that makes sense. No, that's. Okay, so can you speak at all to like the accuracy or lack thereof of climate change models?
Oh, I'm not a climate scientist. I have.
Okay,
no
okay.
And also that's that's a great example of a problem because everything that we're happening now, we don't have a wealth of historical data of the planet being too hot to use. Did you drop out? I think he might have gone away. Oh, there you are.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
There's an interesting case there where if I have a bunch of customers and some of them have failed and some of them have not, I have training data that I can use to build a model. The Earth has never been like this before. It's never been this populated before. So there's no training data for this model, right? So, and it's a very complicated system. It stands to reason that, like, you know, unless we have several different Earths and we can see this happening in several different Earths where we could build a model, we don't have that ability. We have to kind of guess about what's going to happen. That being said, I think we can make some pretty good relationships between, you know, carbon and climate and the, you know, catastrophe and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's climate scientists, climatologists, meteorologists, earth scientists, environmental scientists who, you know, like I don't know. Well, I mean, besides a few people on the right wing fringe, that we need to get off fossil fuels. I mean, that's like, okay, we have to do that. That's pretty clear. Okay, you know, we know that past a certain point of carbon dioxide, you know, parts per million in the air is going to be accelerate all sorts of terrible things. We know that it's not. That's not a fundamental.
these are not built out of predictive models or anything similar to what I would be doing. Those kinds of inferences are just like based on the nature of all of these elements and how they behave. It's reasonable to assume that we will be in trouble if we don't do something about climate change. And it doesn't require a previous instance of this happening in order to validate that.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly. So, all right, very cool. Well, I think we're at the end. That flew by, because that's how awesome conversing with you is.
Yeah, it's a great time, man. Anytime. Always a pleasure to see you. Look forward to hanging out. Come to Portland sometime. I'll look forward to seeing you in Chicago.
Sounds good. Absolutely. Let's make that happen. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining William Harding and myself on the Illinois Green Party series. Take care of yourself next time. Till next time, be good, be green.